The sirens wailed through the night, air as ambulances screeched into the emergency bay of JST Hospital in Rustenburg. The accident on the highway had been brutal. The hospital was overwhelmed, doctors and nurses moving like a well-oiled machine to stabilize the injured. Dr. Kwame worked tirelessly, his forehead damp with sweat as he stitched wounds, reset broken bones and monitored vitals. Among the injured was a man in his late 40s, unconscious but breathing. His chart read, David Molifer, 47 years old. Severe internal bleeding, broken ribs and a head injury. As the days passed, Kwame became more invested in David's case. Against all odds, he was improving. Every morning, Kwame checked in, and every evening they spoke. David spoke of his children, the nieces and nephews he supported, and the life he fought so hard to keep. Then, the unthinkable happened. Just when David was stable, his heart failed. A sudden cardiac arrest. The code blue alarm rang through the hospital halls. Kwame and the team fought to bring him back. They shocked his heart, administered adrenaline. Nothing worked. David was gone. Kwame stood frozen, his hands still pressed to David's unmoving chest. A sharp pain twisted in his stomach. He had saved so many lives that night, but not this one. The man who had beaten the odds, the man with a family waiting for him, was gone. Hours later, Kwame sat alone in his office, staring blankly at the floor. The weight of failure crushed him, his chest tightening with grief. A lump formed in his throat, and before he knew it, tears spilled down his cheeks. A soft knock came at the door. Dr. Lerato stepped inside, her usual confident posture replaced with concern. She had seen the signs all day. Kwame had barely spoken, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an unbearable load. Kwame, she called gently. He didn't answer, just ran a hand over his face, ashamed to be seen like this. Lerato sighed, closing the door behind her. You can't save them all, you know that. Kwame let out a shaky breath. He was getting better, Lerato. He fought so hard. I thought he would make it. She sat beside him, her voice calm but firm. We can never get attached, Kwame. That's the rule. We fight for them. We give them everything we have. But when it's over, we let go. Kwame swallowed hard. I don't think I can let go of this one. Then, in a move that surprised even herself, Lerato reached out and took his hand. You don't have to do it alone, she whispered. That night, as they walked out of the hospital together, the air was cool. The grief between them didn't disappear, but for the first time, Kwame felt like he wasn't drowning in it. One moment led to another. A late-night conversation turned into dinner into stolen glances, and soon, they found themselves drawn to each other in ways neither had expected. Their bond had been forged in pain, but something deeper was growing, something neither of them could ignore. Love against the odds. The love between Kwame and Lerato blossomed slowly, like a sunrise spilling warmth over the land. What started as quiet companionship turned into late-night conversations, shared laughter over hospital coffee, and gentle touches that lingered just a moment too long. Kwame was patient. He let their love grow naturally, never rushing, never demanding. He admired Lerato's strength, the way she commanded respect in a room full of surgeons, the way she fought for her patients with everything she had. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Lerato, in turn, found herself drawn to Kwame's heart, his kindness, his unwavering dedication to helping others. He had a quiet confidence about him, a sense of purpose that made her feel safe. But love is never without its tests. The return of the mining mogul. One evening, as Lerato left the hospital, she found a familiar figure waiting by her car. Chepo, tall, well-dressed, and exuding the charm of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. Chepo had been her first serious boyfriend, the heir to a mining empire that controlled half of Rustenburg's platinum industry. Their relationship had ended years ago. Lerato had chosen medicine over the lavish life he offered. Lerato, he greeted with a confident smile. It's been a while. She folded her arms. What do you want, Chepo? I want you back. His voice was smooth, persuasive. You and I were meant to build something great together. You left, but I never stopped thinking about you. Lerato sighed. I didn't leave you, Chepo. I left the life you wanted for me. I'm a doctor. That's who I am. Chepo chuckled. And what does this new man of yours have that I don't? I hear he's just a doctor too. Lerato's patience snapped. He has a heart, Chepo. He cares about people, not just profit. For the first time, Chepo's smile faltered. He wasn't used to losing. You'll regret this, he warned. Lerato didn't even flinch. I doubt it. And with that, she left him standing in the parking lot. Her heart racing, but not from fear, from certainty. She had made her choice. And it was Kwame. The truth about Kwame. Days turned into weeks, and their love only grew stronger. But Kwame had a secret. one that he knew he couldn't hide forever. One evening, as they sat on his balcony overlooking the city, he took her hands in his. "Lerato, there's something I need to tell you." She looked up, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" "I'm not just a doctor," he admitted. "I'm a prince. My father is the king of an Akan kingdom in Ghana." Lerato blinked, pulling her hands away. "A prince?" she echoed. Kwame nodded. "I never wanted my title to define me. That's why I left Ghana to become a doctor. But my family, they still expect me to return one day." Lerato stood, pacing. "So all this time, the way you help people, the way you can afford to support families like the Molofes, it all makes sense now." Kwame watched her carefully. "Does it change how you feel about me?" Lerato bit her lip. "I don't know. I mean, one day, you'll have to go back. One day, you might have to choose between medicine and the throne." Kwame stood, placing his hands on her shoulders. "I already made my choice, Lerato. I chose you." Tears welled in her eyes. "But what if duty calls? What if one day you have to go back?" Kwame pulled her into his arms. "Then we'll face that day together. But right now, all I know is that I love you." Lerato exhaled shakily, resting her head against his chest. She didn't have all the answers. But for now, love was enough. This Kwame and Lerato's love had become a force of nature, unshakable, undeniable. Her family adored him, welcoming him as their own. They called him Prince playfully, marveling at how a man of such status carried himself with humility. Even Lerato's stern uncle, who had never approved of any of her past relationships, took a liking to Kwame. Kwame and Lerato's love wasn't just about them. It extended beyond borders, beyond hospitals, beyond what most people imagined love could be. A year into their relationship, their passion for medicine led them to join Doctors Without Borders. They traveled across Africa, healing wounds both physical and emotional. In Mzuzu, Malawi, they worked tirelessly in understaffed hospitals, treating malnourished children, delivering babies in candlelit rooms, and performing surgeries with limited resources. Then came Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Political conflict had left many wounded, hospitals were overflowing, and the Red Cross called for reinforcements. Kwame and Lerato didn't hesitate. For weeks, they treated civilians caught in the crossfire. Kwame performed emergency surgeries, while Lerato managed trauma patients, working in conditions where gunfire could be heard in the distance. Their reputation grew. JST Hospital in Rustenburg hailed them as heroes. Across Africa, they became known as doctors who didn't just save lives, they restored hope. But even as their love grew stronger, they knew one thing remained: marriage. A royal wedding like no other. Their wedding was nothing short of magical. They married in South Africa, surrounded by close family, friends, and colleagues. It was a beautiful, intimate ceremony, filled with heartfelt vows. The sun dips low over Rustenburg, painting the Magaliesberg Mountains in hues of amber and rose. A lavish outdoor ceremony unfolds at a grand estate, where the air hums with the melody of marimbas and the scent of blooming proteas. Dr. Kwame, Prince of the Akan Kingdom and celebrated surgeon, stands resplendent in a kente cloth sash draped over a tailored, ivory suit, a fusion of royal Ghanaian heritage and modern elegance. His crown, a subtle circlet of gold adorned with cocoa pod motifs, glints in the light. Guests from across Africa gather, chiefs in vibrant agbadas, medical colleagues in crisp white coats, and South African elders draped in shweshwe prints. Dr. Lerato, radiant in a gown of champagne silk, glides toward him, her train embroidered with ndebele patterns and Ghanaian adinkra symbols. The aisle is strewn with marigolds and acacia leaves, a bridge between their two worlds. Behind them, a waterfall cascades into a pool dotted with floating candles, while tables groan under platters of jollof rice, biltong, and golden plantains. The sky, a tapestry of twilight, seems to bow in approval. Dr. Kwame's vows. His voice carries the weight of history and hope. A prince and healer in one breath. Lerato, my Ohema, my queen, long before I knew you, my hands were trained to save lives, but you showed me how to live one. In you, I found a love deeper than the rivers of Kumasi, brighter than the gold of my father's throne. As a prince, I was taught to lead. As a doctor, I swore to serve. But as your husband, I vow to cherish, to honor your voice as the elders honor the sacred stools of Akan kings, to stand with you as the Adomi Bridge stands over the Volta, unshaken, unbroken. When the world feels heavy, I will lift you, like the sun lifts the mist from Lake Buzumtwi. Here in this land that is now ours, I pledge my heart, not as a prince, but as a man who has found his true crown in you. Dr. Lerato's vows. She smiles, tears mingling with the dusk's glow. Her words a hymn to him and his homeland. Kwame, my healer, my warrior king, you are the miracle I never wrote in my medical journals. The moment I saw you, I felt Ghana's spirit. The rustle of cocoa groves, the laughter of Buswa beach waves, whispering, "This is your destiny." I vow to love you as the Akan earth loves the rain, with patience, with fierceness, with roots that outlast seasons. I will honor the prince who walks hospital halls with humility and the doctor who carries his people's dreams like sacred relics. Together, we'll build a life where Rustenburg's stars mingle with the fireflies of Kumasi, where our children will know the scent of Ghana's clay and the song of South, Africa's winds. You are my sanctuary, Kwame, my forever kingdom. They clasp hands, their foreheads touching, as drums erupt and guests ululate. A shower of hibiscus petals rains down, blending Ghana's crimson with South Africa's gold, a new legacy born. But Ghana awaited them. The Akan kingdom hosted a second, grand reception in honor of their prince. Lerato's family, though comfortable in life, had never seen such opulence. Golden palaces, silk-lined carriages, servants bowing at their every move. It was a world beyond their imagination. For them, this was a glimpse into fairy tales, where their daughter had married into royalty. Lerato, though used to Kwame's wealth, was still in awe of the sheer grandeur of Akan tradition. Privately, the king called Kwame aside. "My son," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Tradition is powerful, but love is stronger. I have watched Lerato. She is everything a queen should be." Kwame listened intently as his father continued. "I will repeal the law that forbids an outsider from becoming queen. I will not let an old tradition stand in the way of a good ruler or a good marriage." Kwame was speechless. His father smiled. Her name, Lerato, means love, and that is all that truly matters. For the first time, Kwame realized love had not just won. It had changed history. Life was moving fast for Kwame and Lerato, between medical missions, hospital shifts, and their growing influence in Africa's healthcare system. They barely had time to breathe, but amidst their hectic schedules, one moment made them pause. Lerato was expecting their first child. The news filled their hearts with joy. Kwame was over the moon, doting on Lerato at every turn, making sure she didn't overwork herself. Despite her protests, he insisted on carrying her medical bag, making her meals, and ensuring she rested whenever possible. But their joy was short-lived. One evening, as Kwame returned from a long shift at JST Hospital, his phone rang. The voice on the other end was urgent, trembling. "Prince Kwame, I'm sorry, but the king is no more." Kwame froze. His father was dead. It didn't make sense. The king was a strong man, not even sick, yet he had dropped dead just like that. Lerato found Kwame standing motionless, his phone still in his hand. She didn't need to ask. The pain in his eyes told her everything. Without hesitation, the couple packed their bags and flew to Ghana, Lerato carrying not just grief in her heart, but their unborn child in her womb. The Akan kingdom was drowning in sorrow. The Golden Palace, usually alive with music and tradition, now stood silent and heavy with grief. Thousands gathered to mourn their king, their beloved leader. But in the midst of mourning, whispers of suspicion spread like wildfire. The king was poisoned, some whispered. No, it was a heart attack, others argued. Rumors circled, but there was no evidence. The elders, afraid of instability, dismissed the speculation, declaring that it was simply the will of the ancestors. After days of traditional rites, prayers, and ceremonies, Kwame and his family laid the king to rest. But even before the ashes of mourning could settle, the question of succession arose. According to Akan tradition, a generation can only produce one king. This meant that the rightful heir should have been Kwame. However, Kwame had refused the throne before, choosing Lerato over royalty. The elders, desperate for a solution, placed the king's younger brother as regent, a temporary ruler. But this decision was problematic. The king's brother was from the same generation as the late king, which meant he could never be crowned permanently. Tensions began to rise. The kingdom needed stability. The elders turned their attention to Kwame once again. The whispers turned into formal discussions. Kwame was summoned before the Council of Elders. They welcomed him with respect, offered condolences, but then came the inevitable conversation. "Prince Kwame, it is time," he frowned. "Time for what?" "For you to take your rightful place as king." Kwame sighed. "I have already given you my answer." The eldest among them nodded slowly. "We understand your hesitation. However, you must honor tradition. You cannot be king unless you marry a royal wife." A silence filled the room. Kwame sat up straight, his jaw tightening. "So, let me understand this. You are asking me to abandon my wife. Not abandon, another elder corrected. Simply take another wife, one from the royal bloodline. Kwame clenched his fists. There is no simply about it. Lerato is my wife, my only wife. I will never take another. Murmurs broke out among the elders. One of them tried to reason with him. My prince, this is the way of our ancestors. Then keep your ancestors, your throne and your crown. Kwame interrupted, standing up. His voice was strong, unwavering. I will keep my wife. The elders gasped. No prince had ever spoken like this before. Kwame turned to leave. Before stepping out, he looked over his shoulder and spoke one last time. The kingdom needs a leader, but it won't be me. With that, he walked away, leaving the elders in stunned silence. The Akan kingdom was at a crossroads. With the king gone, the throne stood empty, and the council of elders was deeply divided. The late king had only one son, Kwame, and two daughters, who were not eligible for the throne. By tradition, Kwame was the rightful heir, but tradition also dictated that a king must marry a woman from the royal bloodline. And Kwame had already chosen Lerato. The council's dilemma. With Kwame refusing to take another wife, some elders sought an alternative. They suggested that the next best candidate should be Kofi, the son of the regent. Kofi was an intelligent man, a university law lecturer, and when approached, he gladly accepted the offer to be king, but not everyone agreed. The council room became a battlefield of words. Kwame is the rightful heir, some elders argued. It is his birthright. But tradition forbids a foreign queen, others countered. The debate raged on for days. A fight for Kwame. The pro-Kwame elders refused to back down. How many times have we seen Kwame work like a slave to save his people? One of them demanded. Have you forgotten the disasters he helped us through? The hospitals he built? The people he healed? Others nodded in agreement. A king should be chosen for his heart, not just his bloodline. Then, one elder raised a critical point. If tradition was so important, why did the late king allow Kwame to marry a foreigner? A heavy silence followed. Corruption in the council. But not all elders had pure intentions. Some had been bought with money to support Kofi's claim. Greedy politicians, businessmen, and rival families saw an opportunity. If Kofi took the throne, they could control him. Despite this corruption, the majority of the council still wanted Kwame, but their hands were tied. A painful decision. According to sacred tradition, if an heir refused the throne, he had to personally pass the staff of power to his successor on the day of coronation. In a shocking turn of events, Kwame agreed. Lerato's heartache. That night, Lerato couldn't sleep. She lay beside Kwame, watching him stare at the ceiling, deep in thought. Her heart ached for him. She knew how much his father had wanted him to lead their people. She knew how much he loved his homeland. Finally, she whispered, Kwame, are you sure? He turned his head to look at her. I have no choice. Tears welled in her eyes. Then, maybe you should take a second wife. Kwame sat up, stunned. Lerato, no. She grabbed his hand, pleading. Listen to me. I love you, but I also know what this kingdom means to you. Maybe you can... No. His voice was firm. She bit her lip. Kwame! He cupped her face gently. I love you, Lerato. I chose you. No throne, no kingdom, no tradition will ever make me betray you. She broke down in his arms, both of them knowing that the next morning, Kwame would give up his birthright forever. The palace was in chaos. The council of elders argued endlessly, and the coronation, which was meant to be a simple ceremony, had now been adjourned for further talks. Though Kofi had gladly accepted the crown, his reputation was a major problem, a controversial successor. Kofi was known for his lavish parties and endless affairs. Despite being married to a royal wife, he was no leader. He was a scandal waiting to happen. The villagers murmured in discontent. How can such a man lead us? They whispered. Some elders, the ones who had supported Kwame, tried one last time to make him reconsider. Your people want you, Kwame. But Kwame didn't care about the throne. He was busy overseeing the construction of new health facilities in rural areas. He had already partnered with international organizations to bring in medical aid. To him, this was real leadership, preparing to leave the palace. As the debates continued, preparations for Kwame's departure from the palace were underway. After Kofi's coronation, Kwame, his mother, and their staff were expected. As the debates continued, preparations for Kwame's departure from the palace were underway. After Kofi's coronation, Kwame, his mother, and their staff were expected to vacate and move to a newly built mansion, a holiday home funded by a gold mining company in honor of the king. The idea was that Kwame's mother would be taken care of, with allowances and daily expenses covered by the monarchy until her death. While the transition seemed smooth on paper, It didn't sit right with Kwame. "I don't need this power, Lerato," he told her one evening as they prepared to leave. "My father's wealth is mine, but it's not what I'm after. I don't need a throne to serve my people. I have more than enough already. Let me do what I've always done, heal the sick." Lerato, deeply troubled by his decision, tried again to convince him to lead. "But you can do both. Kwame, you can serve as king and continue your work as a doctor. You don't have to choose one over the other." Kwame gently shook his head, his voice filled with resolve. "No, my love, being a king would take me away from the one thing I love most, helping people. I don't need the crown to make a difference." Lerato's heart ached, knowing how hard this was for him. "But what about your people?" she asked, trying to understand. "They need you. The king can do so much more for them, and so can you." Kwame took her hands in his eyes softening. "I don't need to wear a crown to make a difference. My people have already benefited from the work I've done. I'm content with that." The day had arrived, and the tension in the kingdom was palpable. The air was thick with anticipation, and every face in the crowd seemed to be holding its breath. Kofi's coronation was set, yet it was clear that Kwame's refusal to wear the crown had already shifted the tide. The regent, desperate for control, had paid off influential figures to support his son's rise to power. But the kingdom was divided. The atmosphere in the hall was somber, and as tradition dictated, Kwame had to give a speech explaining his refusal to take the throne. His heart was heavy, but his resolve remained steadfast. Kwame stood up, his royal robe flowing around him, his presence commanding attention. Kofi was standing beside him, also dressed in his ceremonial robes, his face uncertain. The two brothers, standing in front of the kingdom, represented everything that had come to define their choices. Kwame took a deep breath, and then he addressed his people. "My people, we are gathered here today to see the coronation of our next king. Kofi is my brother, so whether it is him or me on the throne, it is one and the same. Today, I cede my right to be king because of a law, a traditional law, that says a foreign woman cannot be queen. You were all here when my wife, then my fiancé, worked alongside me in the hospitals, saving people from the plague that struck us. Why was she not good enough to be your queen then, simply because she is foreign? Most of you, your children's fees and social support are covered because of my wife. So, she is only good when helping, but not good enough to be your queen." Kwame paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. Every face turned toward him, and he could feel the weight of their expectations. His voice grew softer, but it carried with the strength of his conviction. "I know to the world she is just a woman, but to me, she is the world. Princess Lerato, my wife, I love you." The room fell into a deep silence. The words hung in the air, piercing through the tension. It was as if the weight of Kwame's truth had settled in every heart present. Shaking their core beliefs, Kwame walked toward the regent, kneeling before him to show his final respect. But the symbolism was unmistakable. He was giving up his claim to the throne, not for his own benefit, but for his love. The regent handed him the staff of power, a symbol of the monarchy. But Kwame's hands didn't hold it for long. He walked toward Kofi, the next in line, and as he approached, he offered the staff to him. Kofi, however, did not accept it. Instead, Kofi kneeled down before his brother, bowing with respect. Then he rose to speak. "As per our tradition, I am supposed to accept this staff of power, but I will not." His voice rang out with strength and conviction. "If you refuse Kwame because of his foreign wife, then I am not ready to lead a people so backward that they would reject someone of such worth. None among us is half the man Kwame is, and you want to disqualify him because of a tradition that doesn't benefit anyone." Kofi turned to face the kingdom, and his words echoed through the hall. "You either crown Kwame or look for another king, because I know I will never preside over a kingdom that doesn't accept its true leader. And if you don't accept Kwame, you will forever yearn for the true king that is not me." The crowd stood in stunned silence. Kofi had just rejected the throne, and the boldness of his words made it clear that his heart was not in this for power, but for what was right. He had chosen honor over tradition. Kofi then bowed to his brother, hailing him as the rightful king. Kwame stood tall, humbled, yet resolute. "I accept my people's choice," he said. And in that moment, the kingdom saw the true strength of leadership, not born from birthright, but from character, integrity, and love for the people. The leader of the council stood up and declared, "As you can see, our people have chosen their king." Kwame's coronation was not just the acceptance of a throne, but a declaration that true leadership was not bound by outdated traditions. And with that, Kwame was crowned king. It was a new era in a Khan, having a leader who is a servant to his people, a principled leader who is unwavering in his standing, Kwame was a leader who demonstrated that you do not need to be elected in an office to make an impact in your society. New dawn for Africa, new dawn for Akan. As the crown was placed upon his head, Lerato, his unwavering support, stood by his side. The future had been uncertain, but now it was clear. The kingdom would thrive under a king who truly understood the meaning of service and sacrifice. And the people cheered, for they knew that they had witnessed something rare, a leader who chose love over power, compassion over tradition, and above all, who remained true to his people. Kofi was also honored as a man who put first, not as someone who put greed or his ambitions over the greater good of a kingdom. We need more leaders like Kwame and many more people like Kofi. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. See you in next one. Bye.